All right, welcome to the webinar on how to achieve the best device posture. I'm actually somewhat excited to present this webinar today because there's a lot of confusion in the market on what is the best method to be able to do a check on my device to make sure that my device is actually protected and can be trusted as I allow access to a secure resource. So to present myself, my name is Chris Syler. I am the solutions architect at OPSWAT. I have been working in the industry for around 30 years. I was a software architect for multiple years at multiple companies, developing software, doing integrations, solutions for many vendors in the industry and many of our partners. And so, to begin with, we're going to discuss device posture. And device posture is about checking your endpoint device to make sure that all the security products are working correctly. All right. As you determine device posture with your system, there's multiple ways that you can get that information to be able to make sure that the system is secure. One method that people use is just using Windows Security Center. So, to explain Windows Security Center, it's a capability that Microsoft has available with Windows to be able to detect what are the AVs that are running. So, the anti-malware and EDR, et cetera, software that is running. It also has the capability in detecting the firewall, and it will determine if it is running or not. And so, this is built into Windows. The other method that you can use is WMI. So with Windows, if you want to be able to query information associated with the system, then you use the Windows Management Instrumentation, WMI. It's good for doing security center queries that we just talked about with Windows Security Center. It can get you system information, and it also detects like processes that are monitoring other information like geolocation. All that is available in WMI. And so that's another method that you can use for detecting device posture. Now, if your desire is to create a system that can go across platform, a lot of people want to look into OSQuery. OSQuery is a language that is similar to WMI, but it's cross platform. So what happens is you can query the system and get information about the processes that are running. You can also get information about the files in the file system. Or, for instance, like with Windows System Security Center, you can go ahead and query that to get that information back. But that will differ between platforms. But initially, it sounds like, okay, this is a good option. If I want to go cross platform, I can get all this information. Another thing that comes up quite often is Sysmon. Now, Sysmon is actually used to be able to track changes in the system. So if a file gets written, it will notify you if a file has changed. Or if you have a process that starts like Notepad++, it'll come back. It'll say, hey, Notepad++ started, and it'll return back the different events in the system. So it gives you that triggering capability to get that information. And then the last thing that some people do is that some of the security providers actually have their own security score. And so this is going to be like the CrowdStrike, SentinelOnes, et cetera. You could go query those systems on the back end to get a security score of what the health is for the system. And so these are multiple ways that people go about looking at how to get the device posture. The last one I do want to address is that the OPSWAT SDK is really the leader in this space. And not only do we query the OS, like we just talked about for WMI, different device posture checks for getting the processes, getting information about it, but we also categorize it and provide you a catalog of information associated with it. There are multiple capabilities. We could do security analysis. We can do advanced detection of different scripts to be able to determine that a file is running correctly. We will find EDR vendors, firewall preventers, etc. So those are really the different options that are available for detecting your device posture. So I want to deep dive into these a little bit more and explain, what is capable. All right, what is needed to assess device posture? First off, before you figure out what you need to do device posture, we need to figure out why do we do a device posture check. The reason is for your device to be truly trusted before you access that secure resource, whatever that secure resource is. It could be internal files inside your organization. It might be, some of your, confidential numbers or HR information, sensitive information. You need to be able to validate that your machine is not going to be at risk of actually disclosing this information to an outside resource. So, if we look at some of the capabilities here, if we look at device posture, for instance, one of the things we want to check is to see if there's missing patches. And if you look on the other side, it says if we don't have our patches up to date, we could be exploited by ransomware, privilege escalation tools, etc. And so you can read down the different capabilities. So missing patches. If our antivirus is disabled, then we can have, different type of malware on the system. And if the information is not encrypted, if your system gets actually stolen before you put that on there, someone can grab it. If there's malware on there that's already just grabbing information, weak browser policies, you can have some sort of phishing that happens. So essentially, you can see that there are all sorts of different things that can happen if you don't check all these different security checks on your system. And so multiple products are out there in the industry that allow you to prevent this. And you, as an organization, are going to choose the product that best meets your needs. And so, when you do a device posture check, your capability needs to be able to check whatever need you, as a customer, whatever program you're using as a customer, to be able to get that information back. So, here are some of the checks that you'll need to do. You should be able to check to see if there's missing patches. You need to make sure the anti-malware EDR is working correct. Make sure there's no vulnerabilities, that geolocation is working, running in in a location where you know it is secure. To make sure that the firewall is running so you're not at risk of people coming in and trying to get access through open ports, and encryption's running. So there are definitely multiple checks that need to be done when checking your system to make sure that it is a secure device so that you can trust it as it goes and gets access to that secure resource. And so now let's go ahead and go through those technologies that we just talked about, which allows you to do these different types of checks and see what's available. So let's begin with WMI. WMI is Windows only, and it could do these following checks. It could do a geolocation, firewall, encryption. It could do anti-malware EDR checks with the ability of System Center, and it could do some real-time monitoring. Now, to show you how this works, I wrote a little program that queries WMI. I'm going to just bring it in here. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to run this program here. It's pretty straightforward. It's going to get our antivirus products, some firewall products, and some system information. And so we'll go ahead and run this. All right, if I come back to the results here, what we see is we saw that we got some antivirus products. Let's see if I can bring this in a little bit for you to see a little bit better. Okay, so the antivirus products that we have is we found Windows Defender, Avira Security. So it found 2 AVs. And just so you know, what I've done is on this system, it has Windows Defender running, Avira Security, and Malwarebytes. And so in this particular instance, we found some of the AV products that were on the system. Now, I put 3 on there just to see if it would detect all all the different products. And what you find out is very quickly that Windows, Security Center, it works. It tells you different products, but sometimes some of the vendors are not actually registering with Windows Security Center. And so you don't see all the products show up. And so in this case, we see that Avira shows up and we see Windows Defender, which is great. Now, if I come down to the firewall products, it does show me that Windows Defender and Avira is running as far as that's concerned, but there are no actual firewall products found. So it's only finding those as AV products. And then it does report back system information. So you can see that this will get you partway there. It's going to get you some sort of confidence level that you do have some sort of an anti-malware system running. It tells you the system information so you can validate that that is correct. But you are going to run into some issues where not everything is registered correctly. The other issue that you're going to run into is that with some of these vendors, you then need to sort of categorize where it's at. So you can say, hey, I want to just go get the process information. Well, then you're going to end up having to have a team, which we do have at OPSWAT, that's going to have to constantly monitor the different applications and create a catalog of everything that exists. And so that's how WMI works. So let's go to the next one. The next one I would like to discuss is OSQuery. Now, OSQuery is really nice because it allows you to go multi-platform. So if you need to find out quickly, some patch management information, figure out, the anti-malware systems, or find out what processes are running or system information, and it really excels at system information and getting the processes running cross-platform. It returns all this information in a SQL capability. And so let's pull over the little application I wrote for WMI to give you an idea of how that works. So we'll go ahead and quit this one and look at the OSQuery here. You can see here the OSQuery. It's pretty straightforward. It will return everything in a query language, and you query everything via SQL. Oh, I apologize. That is. Hey, let's start this one over, okay? I'm going to go ahead and so we don't go back and forth. Okay. So now let's talk about OSQuery. OSQuery is nice. It's got the advantage over WMI that you can actually query information across platforms. So you can query on Windows, Linux, or Mac, and you can get the system information. You could also get the processes running, and you can query the file system, and it's all done via SQL queries. And it does have the ability to still query Windows Security Center to be able to get the information from Windows Security Center, but it also has the ability to also get some of the patch information. And so if I come back here to our samples, I'm going to go ahead and we'll go to the OSQuery one. Let's open up this program. And so here you'll see we're going to detect the antivirus and firewall and system info, just like we did for WMI. And the queries are quite simple. It's going to be select star from patches, from programs, etc. So let's go ahead and run this. All right, let's go ahead and see what our results look like. All right, in this case, it returned the antivirus and firewall. So it detected that Windows Firewall was running, and it's a type firewall. And then it detected Avira is running as antivirus, and Avira is running, and Microsoft Defender is running. So we're still missing Avira Firewall in this case, but it easily detected all the system information, etc. So really, you're just querying Windows Security Center. And so you end up with whatever the weakness is with Windows Security Center, you inherit that with OSQuery. The other issue is that, yes, you can still query the processes, get the events, but you'll have to build out a query. You're going to have to map out what is this process that's running. And then you can only go as so far. You can say, "Hey, is this process running?" But you don't know like a deeper analysis like, "Hey, is this process associated with this AV vendor?" Let's say Avira, for instance. And when was the last time it actually updated its definition file? Or is it running real-time protection? All of that, you'd have to build all that information out with OSQuery. It's just not there. You just have pretty much simple queries, but they do grow cross-platform. All right. So that's how OSQuery works. So you could get this information, but you're going to have to build up a lot of other information associated with it. And if you really want to have detailed info, you're probably going to have a team that monitors this all the time to be able to get you that information and make those mappings accordingly. Now, Sysmon appears like it does a whole lot of information, but in reality, Sysmon is really just good for real time monitoring. So that's going to detect if a process is running and it'll return back, hey, a process started or a process stopped. And so to sort of give you a demo here, we'll go ahead and come in here to Sysmon and start this up. And so Sysmon is now telling me about the current processes that I have running. It gives me some of the information. You can see the build number, the process information. It'll give you maybe the vendor, etc. But what you'll need to do is it's nice with, for instance, if I start Notepad, you'll see here it just figured out Notepad started. It gave me that event back. And so it's very good at capturing all the events that run in the system. But what it's lacking is the query part. That's where you would have to go back and get information with WMI or OSQuery. Now, obviously, this runs on Windows only, so you'd be limiting yourself just to a Windows system. Um, but yeah, that's essentially what Sysmon does. Right. Now, the last one that you see start happening in the industry is that they are providing security score providers. So this is usually a CrowdStrike, a very trusted company, a Sentinel One, very trusted companies. They're they're querying their tools on the endpoint and they're validating that their tools are working correctly. And so that is very good. So if you want to be able to know that this tool is working correctly, they will give you a security score, provide some of this information that we've seen as far as encryption, whether the AV is working correctly. But it really depends on the provider. So if the provider does not check browser plugins, you're not going to get that information. If the provider is not doing a geolocation search or not getting system information, you don't get that. The other thing is that as you decide to lock in with it, you are using a trusted provider, but all things change in the world, right? And so you never know, for instance, if there's going to be some sort of vulnerability. I've seen companies, and I've talked to one of our partners right now, they're struggling because they found a vulnerability in some of their code. And that causes that particular customer to struggle. And it's very hard sometimes for them to overcome that. And so you as a customer, when some sort of vulnerability hits, you want to make sure that you are protected. For instance, in my own career, when I was working about 15 years ago, I worked for a patch management company. And there were some times that we would deploy a patch, happened to be a Windows OS patch, and it would blue screen all the systems in the environment. Then customers then start reevaluating, are we the proper vendor for them to be able to continue to move forward with them as a partner? And so you, as a developer who is wanting to include device posture in your product, needs to consider that. If I just say I am okay with just using one or two vendors and getting their security score back, I've now locked my customers into saying you can only use these particular products. There's other things that win. For instance, in Europe, sometimes there's not as much trust in American companies. Or, as we go to other parts of the world, you run into all sorts of cultural issues and such. If you can get a provider that supports all the different vendors, you don't run into all those issues that would cause problems in selling the product, cause problems in you retaining the customer, making it so your customer has to pay a lot more money because they want that device posture, but now they have to use the vendors that you choose. And so, personally, I think that's a risky business to be able to say, I only support a couple of vendors and I support their security score to say that's good enough for device posture. Me as a customer, I would be very cautious because I never know what's going to happen. I, as a customer, could just be acquired and I'm then forced into having to use a different AV vendor, for instance. Now I have to throw out whatever that was that I was using that had device posture in it because I can no longer support it because I have pressure down from the new company in. And so those types of things, really limit you. If you have a product that's flexible, supports all the different capabilities, you don't run into those issues. And so those are the concerns that I have. So yes, you do get a good security score from that particular vendor, but there are all sorts of different things that could change it. Like I said, political issues, mergers. It could be easily, like we said, a vulnerability in some sort of software changes the opinion of your customers on what to use there. And so that would be your risk. The last one I'm going to discuss is the OPSWAT SDK. As you can see here, we do handle all those checks that are important checks. The browser, we check for vulnerabilities, um, whether the patches are missing. We check geolocation to make sure that if that device is running in a place that is secure. So that could either be your own customer environment, or it could be a country, could be a region, etc. We detect encryption, we detect anti-malware. And not only are we detecting anti-malware, we're detecting, was it last updated? Or what we're detecting, is anti-phishing on, is anti-ransomware on, is real-time protection enabled. We're also detecting system information, and we do real-time monitoring. We provide callbacks when things change in the system. And this all works cross-platform. And so at this point in time, I'm going to show you how this works with our OPSWAT SDK. So I'll come in here. We'll go ahead and run this. And let's go ahead and see what we have for our results. Okay. So one thing about the OPSWAT SDK is everything's in JSON, so it's easily parsable. So many tools available for that. And so let's just look at the anti-malware products. So since we use individual scripts to go out and detect the different products, we detected Windows Defender. We also detected Avira. And guess what? We also found Malwarebytes, right? That was also missed by security, the Microsoft's Windows Security Center. We also detected the state of them all. So we detect, is real-time protection running? And we'll tell you, yes, it is running. It's running for this particular product, which is Signature 477. This maps to a product up above, Windows Defender. So we'd tell you, hey, it is, the antivirus is running, and anti-spyware is also enabled. You just don't get any of that information with all those other vendors. You're going to have to query log files, registry information, different files associated with the system to, you may have to run a command line utility. And one thing we do at OPSWAT is that we have partnerships with many of these vendors where we will go in and evaluate their products, and we help give them scores on how well of a product they're running. And we also have partnerships with our other product line, which has a multi-scanner capability. So we have strong partnerships to be able to get all this information for you. We could tell you if it's running, and we'll tell you also when was the last scan time. So not only is it up to date, but has there been a scan in the last month, hopefully in the last day. And we get all this information across the different products. This one's happening for Avira, and then we should have one more here for Malwarebytes, giving all that information. Now we'll discover the firewalls. Now we discovered Avira as a firewall, and Windows firewall is available, and the OS information is all there. So as you can see here with OPSWAT, we have the flexibility, we have the capability of getting this information, and we cover just under 5,000 applications for getting this info. For AV products alone, there's over 100 different applications. I believe it's close to 200 at this point that we support. We have catalogs available to be able to identify all the different products. We'll get you the latest version that works. We also handle a case that makes it real tricky. It's like when the vendor, for instance, gets spun off. Recently, this happened with McAfee, right? McAfee, strong vendor, but then they spun it off into two different organizations, Sky High and Trellix, which caused all the products to change. And so your team, if you decide to go down the OSQuery or WMI, right, you would have to be constantly updating it to be able to make sure that you understand, hey, this has changed because of this difference in business terms with that company. And so those are all things that you need to consider. And those are things that we handle for you. So you will always have a product that will get that updated, and you just have to query the information, and that's all you have to worry about. All right. If we are going to show an overall result, you'll see here that Sysmon doesn't do a lot of querying, but it does some great real-time monitoring. WMI, as far as the browser plugins, it doesn't go into depth. It only runs on Windows, and it doesn't give you any CVE information. And OPSWAT, we have our own CVE capabilities. We discover CVEs over 1,200 different applications. OSQuery, same thing. It doesn't have geolocation built into it. It does go across the multiple systems, but on anti-malware, for instance, you don't have anything on Mac or Linux to discover it, and you're going to have to start really creating that catalog of different providers. Security score, it really just depends on whatever providers you are integrating in with. Some of them have all the information provided. Most of them have an anti-malware EDR product or a firewall product, but some of them, they don't have browser plugin queries or geolocation, etc. And lastly, OPSWAT, as you can see, we strive very hard to be able to provide you the best device posture capability in the industry. And we provide that across, as I said, over just under 5,000 vendors, across hundreds of anti-malware vendors, across multiple firewall vendors, etc. All right. In conclusion, here's what I discovered as I was looking for it is as I looked at each of these individual technologies, they do have some strengths. So WMI is obviously the native integration layer. It's a flexible query capability. You're getting the information straight from Windows. It's well documented, has pretty much a lot of the information you're going to have. But the downside is it is Windows only. And we showed you Windows Security Center doesn't always work as expected. And you don't have some of the other capabilities such as browser detection. You don't have any CVE detection, and you have to build that catalog out that we talked about. OSQuery, it does a fantastic job of querying information cross platform. SQL's easy. You can use it very quickly. You can go ahead and get all the file queries, process queries, but then again, we talked about the catalog. You have to build out the catalog to figure out what is this process. And then it also doesn't have some of the other capabilities, such as browser vulnerability detection. It will query Windows Update to tell you missing patches, but you can't even install a missing patch with OSQuery. It doesn't have any remediation options. It's purely query, and it doesn't have that catalog. I'm going to try this one once more. OSQuery. So OSQuery, it does the job very quickly. Query SQL language is very simple. It is easy to understand. You can quickly build up your product and it'll go across platform. Um, and it will get you process information and queries. It is open source, so your fixes could be a little bit slower. It only has Windows Security Center integration. It doesn't have any integration for Mac or Linux to get you anti-malware or firewall information. Um, it can't detect if a process is malware or not, so you don't necessarily know if that product that you have is actually an anti-malware product or not. It does not do deep queries into the security products. So that's going to be like definition updates or when was the last time it was scanned. It won't query to find out if spyware is running, ransomware, anti-phishing. And there's no capabilities of doing browser plugin detections or CVE detections. And it doesn't have the catalog, just like WMI. You need to be able to then map all those processes to the corresponding anti-malware vendor. Sysmon, it really is a great tool for monitoring when a process starts or stops, but it's Windows only and it doesn't really have any other query capabilities. And so it breaks down really quickly as far as if you want to use it for device posture. And the security score providers, you are using trusted companies. You're getting very accurate results for the products that they have provided for you, but you're limited to just to the EDR vendors that you do integrate in. And then you don't necessarily get the same device posture. So for instance, one vendor is going to have a firewall and encryption capability. Another vendor may not be checking encryption, or perhaps CVEs may be missing with one vendor. And so depending upon where you're at, you're not going to have any consistency. And then as we talked about earlier, industry changes, we talked about political, we talked about mergers, all sorts of those types of changes make you not necessarily able to provide the same capability consistently. And then finally, OPSWAT. We support over 19 different categories to easily query them. So you can query AV vendors, firewall vendors, encryption, etc. As stated before, just around 5,000 security applications. And we have support for all sorts of other device trust capabilities, such as geolocation or vulnerability detection. We can detect browser plugins. It works cross-platform. We have real-time callbacks. And the one thing we didn't really address is we also have support. So if you have an issue, you can call us and we'll work on trying to make that product better. Because our goal at OPSWAT is to work forward and make your product better and our product better, because together we both succeed. And we've been doing this for 20 years. We are integrated to many major vendors' products and provide a great solution with them. So, in final thoughts, if you need basic posture checks, WMI or OSQuery should be sufficient. You're going to just get Windows Security Center, and you can map a couple of processes to different vendors. If you're okay with the AV vendor, just a single AV vendor or multiple AV vendors, like 2 or 3, you could go ahead and use, the CrowdStrike scores, the Sentinel ones. But if you want to be resilient, scalable, future ready, then you really should look at what we have available with OPSWAT. And we are there to be able to continue to move forward on this journey to provide the best device trust in the industry. So some frequently asked questions that we may get. How often is the OPSWAT product database updated? So we talked about that catalog. That database is going to get updated every 4 hours. And so you have the ability every 4 hours of having the latest and greatest. So as we went back to that Trellix McAfee issue, you could have an update within 20 within 4 hours, depending upon how quickly we're able to make the changes, how difficult it is, but we are constantly making those updates. The integration process itself is pretty straightforward. As long as you understand JSON, what it what it means is that you just have a simple call. It's an actual native call that passes in a JSON information for the method, for the in attributes, and then you get JSON out. And so it doesn't matter if you're using C sharp, Java, Python, your endpoint language can be agnostic. As long as you can parse JSON, it's pretty quick. I developed a simple application that would just, do some simple policy checks within a day. Really, it's not so much an issue with our integration, but it's a issue with how innovative you want to be on the checks that you do provide in your own product. And so with OPSWAT, it allows for a lot of innovation and a lot of capabilities that you can add to your product to be able to provide a stellar device posture solution. How does OPSWAT handle updates when the new security products or versions are released? As we said earlier, that we have a team that sits there and monitors all these different applications. And as we get these different applications in, we'll make changes to individual scripts that we are running to be able to get those updates so that you can get the latest and greatest information to be able to continue to make the checks that you are checking, such as is the device running correctly, is the real-time protection on, etc. And what kind of support does OpSwap provide during integration? So as far as integration support is concerned, as a pre-sales team, which I am on, I will help you with all the major technical questions. And as you move forward and you sign with OpSwap, we have a very robust support team that will help you during the integration also to be able to provide you any answers to any questions you need, to be able to provide you samples. You can use us to be able to determine how others have used it in the industry to help you decide what is the best way to integrate. This concludes our webinar discussing OSQuery, WMI, and OPSWAP as options available for you to be able to integrate in and create one of the best device trust solutions in the industry. Thank you very much.